Welcome to this week's story update. This week is especially special because we're speaking with the second storyteller ever on I'm From Driftwood, Antonio. So first, let's take a look at his story.
My name is Antonio Cerna, and I'm from Dallas, Texas. I was filling out one of those online surveys recently. Like, my cousin always spams us with all these emails, get to know your family, and you fill out a questionnaire. And one of the questions was, what was your favorite toy growing up? And so I had to think about it because the memory of the toys that I had growing up was very vague. What I do remember is my sister's Barbie dolls. And she would have tons of them. She had black ones, Asian ones, Latina ones. She had all different Barbie ethnicities. And I was intrigued by them. I was intrigued by these little humanoid things that we were playing with, these little people. And I would design fashion lines for these dolls for my sister out of my mom's old pantyhose. Entire collections. It was this is the evening look, and this is the summer afternoon look, whatever. So it was always a fall collection because the pantyhose were always brown or nude colored, So it was always very subdued color palette. Then I went to go visit cousins, and I realized and I learned that little boys are not supposed to play with Barbies. I didn't realize that that's not what little boys are supposed to do. I was just going with the flow, and the flow was, I like these Barbie outfits. So yeah, I was the cousin. I was the little cousin who plays with Barbies. And now I'm gay. Thank you, Mattel.
Okay, welcome back, Antonio. It's been 11 years since you shared that story. How's it going? How are you doing?
It's going great, all things considered, Besides the pandemic, I think everything is okay.
Besides that little thing. So I want to talk about something specifically in your story about, you playing with Barbie dolls when you were a little kid. And I feel like, especially in the past decade since we last got your story, that things have been changing a little bit for the better. And I feel like toys and clothes, they're becoming more genderless and more accessible to anyone, no matter what your gender is. What's your take on that? Do you agree? Do you feel like it's not gone far enough, or what's your overall idea or feelings about that?
Well, I find it kind of exciting. It's I was just thinking to myself how in the Victorian era, if you wore pink, it was considered a very masculine color. And so little boys would be put into pink because that was very strong, bold, manly color. And little girls would be put in blue because it's soft and frilly and so I think that's really fascinating that the tides have changed since then. And I think it's just showing that more change will come. And we're kind of, in so many ways, we're on the point of a lot of changes, it feels like, not only with this area, but in so many areas of our culture and our country. And so, I don't know, I find it really exciting. My only thought is that I hope it doesn't just mean a lot of gray stuff for kids. Hopefully the gender neutral color will become a very bright color, an orange or yellow or some kind of really exciting, fun color. Because I just remember growing up and loving color. So we'll see.
Yeah, well, maybe hopefully it's not even assigning genders colors. It's just here's every color of a onesie and just get whatever color you like, and that's it. And pink doesn't mean boy or girl. It's just here are colors, wear them.
Right. I was listening to this podcast called Radio Ambulante. It's on NPR, and it's in Spanish. And there was this mom I think she's Argentinian, I want to say. And it's a story about her having 2 children and really coming to understand her child's gender when her child kind of was expressing a gender that was the different gender than what the child was born with, than its biological gender. Or I don't want to get the terminology wrong, but what I want to say is that I thought it was a really interesting story of a mom who really listened to her child and let the child kind of guide her a little bit. And so maybe there's some of that there, let's let the kids decide what color they want.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. And until they can actually communicate that, then just don't force kids to wear certain colors based on their sex I think it's just the takeaway is just relax. And if you like this color, then have your kid wear it, and if not, then have them wear something else, and it shouldn't be that complicated.
It really
What
shouldn't
would
be.
you yeah. What would you tell someone who is, let's say, cognizant and aware, and if they're playing with girl toys and or Barbies if they're a boy, or like more masculine toys if they're a girl, or anything in between, and they feel guilty about it, what would you tell them? Or a similar question, what do you wish that you heard when you were younger and playing with Barbies?
It's such a complicated answer. There is such a good question, and the answer will probably be very complicated in the sense that, like, I think I think if I could look back, I probably would have benefited from having parents that were a little more open to the idea. Because I think I was playing with these toys in secret with my sister so that, like, no one would know that I was a little boy playing with Barbies. And it would never be discussed at school with other kids. Like, you would never want to be outed as like the little boy that plays with dolls. I remember I was outed one Christmas. I was outed because I was helping my little niece build her Barbie doll car. It was like a car with everything in it. Like, it was like a little SUV. And I remember one of my boy cousins came over and was like, why are you helping? What are you doing? Boys don't do that. And I think I would have benefited from a little bit more openness on every one of my families, not just my parents, but my aunts and my cousins, just a little bit more openness and understanding, and just a little bit more go with the flow. Because honestly, like, I can't really tell that it, I, I don't know, I don't feel like I was doing anything really wrong. I was just trying to be creative and express myself, and, play with color and design and how people, so I think I'm hoping that the next generation is already more attuned to this than the one I grew up with, especially families that are Latino, families that are immigrant families, where I think there's a kind of different approach to how you raise your kids. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's so different based on from culture to culture and community to community. But I think based on what you're saying, the big takeaway is let kids lead about who they are. Let them tell you who they are. And the parents, obviously guide them to be kind and good and generous and thoughtful. But in terms of who they are and how they identify, they will let the parents know, and try not to force your own ideas of what a man or a woman or any other gender is onto your kids, if I am hearing you right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think it's okay to mess up. Like, there's no rule book for how to, like, raise your kids in a way that's like the perfect way. And, like, every parent, no matter what you do, your kids are gonna hate you, like, when they become teenagers. Like, no matter what, it's like part of being a teenager. But I think that there is something, like you were saying, about letting the kids lead. I think that's a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, and we'll have to get Mattel to sponsor this, this whole video. So, so what's going on? We, last time we spoke, it was 11 years, or we've seen each other since then. But last time we talked about this story, it's been 11 years. What's different in your life these days, from the past 11 years?
I was thinking about this the other day, and I was remembering that, and I take this for granted now, but 11 years ago, there was no marriage equality. And that's a topic that I feel like you and I, on our own platforms, in our own way, we're fighting for so strongly through, I'm thinking back. So now I'm married. So, in those 10 years, I'm married. And it's like, that was something that wasn't really a possibility before. And it was something that I hadn't even thought of, like something that I would do, because I wasn't allowed to. Growing up, I never thought, as a 17-year-old kid, I never thought I'm going to get married. But out 17-year-old kids now are like, well, when I get married, I'll do this or that. And so I think that's something that's really powerful that changed. Obviously, in those 10 years, like, so much has radically changed with technology, and and in my own life, I still work in children's books, which is really exciting. I'm working for a company now where our mission is to promote marginalized voices, so queer voices, Black, Latino, Indigenous voices, POC voices, voices with disabilities. We're trying to like bring light to those writers who are writing for kids.
Antonio, do you want to talk about any of those books that are available now because some people watching might want to like get those books. So are there any that are available now that you can promote?
So one of the one of them is coming out in August. It's really great. It's a really beautiful book. It's a memoir. It's a true story about a young Iranian immigrant who was came to Oklahoma as an 8-year-old boy and kind of had to assert himself and who he was because the kids in his classroom just couldn't understand everything he was saying about who he said he was. And they just saw him as this like little little brown kid who's just making up stories. And the book is gorgeous, one of the most beautifully written books you'll read. I think adults will actually really enjoy it as well. We're also publishing a book that same day. Another book is coming out by a young woman who is openly asexual. She's Lip and Apache. She's also a geoscientist, and it's a young adult novel called Elatsoe that's really beautiful. And I'm really excited to be putting together the first 2 books on our list, being a book by an Iranian immigrant and another book by a queer woman who is a Native American woman, Native voice. It just makes me really happy to be putting that energy and those people's stories out into the world.
Well, that's amazing. I'm really happy to hear that you're still working in children's literature, and that's great. So I think that ties in really nicely to your story in general and the messages that you shared today. So is there anything else that you wanted to share about your life or your story or anything else at all?
I think so much of the things that are happening in the world today have really inspired me to start wanting to share a little bit more of my family's stories. So I've been doing some writing, which is really fun, and I've been writing down my mom's story. She's, our family was, I'm half Guatemalan, half Mexican, and I'm telling the Mexican side of the story, which is really interesting. And I am telling the story of my grandmother and my mother and my young sister, and sort of that intergenerational interplay between their lives. And I think I wouldn't have felt so empowered or felt that this story was so needed if we weren't experiencing so much of the things that we are experiencing today. It's interesting that it took a pandemic to really wake us all up to like what's really important in our own lives and what's important to us as a society and as a culture. And I hope that the next 10 years, when we do this again, that we will look back on this time as a really pivotal and important time.
I think that's beautiful, and hopefully we'll be able to catch up with each other before another 10 or 11 years. But I love the way that you. What was that?
I'll be 50.
Oh my! You and I both. Yeah. Well, Antonio, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. I'm really glad to hear that things are going well. Congratulations on your marriage, and keep in touch. And also, if anyone has any questions for Antonio, leave them in the comments, and Antonio will ask you to maybe check back periodically if you're okay with that, and respond. And for Antonio's full story and also thousands more, you can just go to imfromdriftwood.org or on our Facebook and Instagram. So check back next week for our next story update. Thanks.